What we're talking about tonight, though, is the positive that we can bring to the porn industry in terms of body positivity. So, with that in mind, we were preparing for this show, and I went to do my research about body positivity in the porn industry, and googling phrases like fat shaming in porn. It's difficult to do that without getting interesting results. Not necessarily the wrong results, just not the results we wanna talk to or about today. So, leave it to Christy to do the digger deeping and get us on track, and Courtney, Christy found your name everywhere. So you do a lot of activism in this space. What can you tell us about the work that you do?
Well, thank you for finding my name all over the place in that field. I definitely think that like fat positivity, body positivity is what got me interested in doing porn in the first place. So, just a little back history. I was a phone sex operator, started when I was 18 years old to make a little bit more money than just your minimum wage job at Blockbuster, which I was also doing. So, I had a lot of fun doing phone sex, but like 18 or 19 years old, I am learning a lot about my sexuality and like what my clients like and what my customers like and stuff. And there was just a big contrast between what I was pretending to be on the phone and like what I was really interested in sexually. So I started making porn. And for me, I had to do it all independently because when I started looking into the kind of porn that I wanted to make, what kind of wanted to be in was lesbian porn and alternative porn. And so we're talking like the year 2001, and everyone is like wearing low rise skinny jeans and is a size 00. And there's just no way in, even I'm going to try not to say too many names, but I've definitely said this company before in my thing. So it's pretty well known that Suicide Girls responded to my application. They're an alt porn website that's been around forever. They were supposed to be like feminist, ethical, women run, all this stuff. Like, oh, we're like the answer to quote unquote bad porn, which we'll talk about. But they rejected me because I was fat.
Oh, let's
And
talk
I
about a
was just like,
contradiction.
so that's cool, but like, what do I do? Like, I'm happy for all of these girls who get to make like empowering porn, but like, where does the fat girl fit in? And it like turns out there really wasn't much that didn't feel like humiliating or poorly lit somehow or just really cheap and bad. So, my activism, I guess, as an artist is making space for myself, creating lesbian queer films, creating and queer films with plus size people in it, with people of all sizes. I really do see my interaction with the mainstream porn industry and sort of my embedding in that world. Sinn and I go to the AVN Awards. I do stuff like that so that people can see my fat body. And I may be one of like 5 porn performers in those spaces who are over a size 7, 6. And that's activism to me, to keep going. And no matter how many times people have said no to me, you're too fat, you don't have big enough tits, you look like too much of a dyke, none of those have ever convinced me to stop making porn. And so I see that as like an active revolution. And like, when I say it that way, I'm pretty proud of myself.
Hell
I
yes.
love it. I love it. Okay, so Sin looked like we were about to respond, so sorry for the pause. But so we've said it before on this show that anything can be used as a slur. But I love the way that you're just owning different labels. And we've always taken the stance before that fat isn't a bad word. But I'm curious how people tend to perceive the word when we talk about it in porn, and if there's other person-centered terms that we should understand. So what are some of those terms that we can like just take and empower and use in porn that maybe other people might take or use as a slur?
Yeah, I'm interested to hear this too, Courtney, because I will say that, I like, okay, when I hear you talking about it and you use the word fat and stuff like that, but like, I have to admit that like, it still makes me feel sort of uncomfortable to say it. Like, is it okay for me to say it? You know,
Right.
I really want to be sensitive. Like, I don't want to use any terms that like do cause someone to be uncomfortable or stuff like that. And so it's just that, like, yeah, I like curvy.
For yourself or for me?
Well, and it's
I
nice to
feel
have
like
terms
it's
that
an
we can
interesting thing.
embrace
Like,
like that.
Yeah.
yeah, like, so, I mean, if you're gonna like throw a slur at someone, like, you're gonna throw that word at them, you're gonna be rude. It's gonna sound like an insult.
Yes.
But if you're just complimenting someone or, taking full stock of what's in front of you, Sinn, if we're gonna do a scene together and you're gonna say, God, I love your fat ass, I'm gonna be into that.
Yeah, totally. I
Like,
mean, I love it. When someone says, I love your fat ass, I'm like, fuck yeah. Absolutely.
so,
And thick.
it's all in the delivery. And I can't speak for anyone else, but as a fat femme, like, as like, like a lesbian or a queer person, these are words
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm okay
Oh,
with.
I like
so what are some of
thick,
the terms
you
then? Like
know.
you mentioned be
Sorry about the
well,
lag.
and
You're good.
no, that's okay. We're gonna power through it anyway. So, we threw out some terms earlier that you were saying that you were trying to kind of like work against. So what are some of the other terms that you can think of that we should avoid then?
Oh, I'm not gonna say them. But okay, so like
Oh no, don't put them out there in the universe.
we were talking about Chelsea Poe a little bit earlier and how she was trying to get rid of derogatory terms sort of in the mainstream trans porn industry and just in the mainstream porn distribution industry at large is it's not like they're all bad people working at these places, but it's
Right.
still taking a long time to get like words like trans woman or like fat porn star, for instance, or plus size
Mhm.
porn star, like words like that, kind of up the chain to the CEOs and the people who matter. Like, I feel like I can get good, like, body positive words into the hands of porn reviewers pretty often. There's definitely some activism there to be done when you're talking to journalists, when you're on radio shows like this, to be able to parse down the language. Um, but for sure, coming from the queer world, like, even the word queer, like, we've reclaimed that. And for me, the word queer is super important because lesbian only fits some of the time, like trans boy kind
Mhm.
of fits every once in a while, like sometimes I'm a gay man, like there's just no telling what I'm going to be at any given point. So for me specifically, as a non-binary person, queer is the only word that like is 100% all the time. But
Same.
and I guess that's like you kind of have to ask people, I ask people like how they identify a lot. I think like what makes you, like what identities are important to you, what kind of activism do you do around your identity, like, you know, like for me a lot of it's wrapped up in being queer and being fat, and I think we all kind of have something we're working towards.
So I think that brings up a really good point when you talk about the terms that we use, whether they're offensive or not, is really going to depend more on the person. Like there's no one term, there's no one size fits all. Like some terms are going to be okay with some people and not okay with
Yeah.
others. And so you bring up a really good point about just really how subjective the porn industry is like with how people are going to respond. So I'm curious on like what treatment or what kinds of treatment or stigma exists towards fat performers or other forms of body diversity inside the industry. You mentioned trans as well, so you're welcome to go anywhere you want with it. But what are some of the sort of stigmas? And you brought up a little bit with trying to get hired. But what are some other things that you've run into?
So I think like some of the problems I've run into for sure is just, I mean, a scarcity of opportunities. They say porn is this billion-dollar industry, and perhaps it is, but it doesn't necessarily mean that production money or funding is going to independent studios or um, some of the places that we might want to see porn come out of. I definitely think like it really is about casting for me. I think that there should be a lot more attention, a lot more eyeballs put on indie porn productions that are just kind of like working with indie performers, content creators. And, I think there's a lot there also with keywords, like some of like the way that porn is marketed towards people can be really confusing. I feel like if you're on like a tube site, you're going to be confronted with racism, fat phobia, inhumane comments.
Mm.
So like that just exists because humans are humans.
Yeah.
And porn is no different.
Yeah.
People are like this with music and movies and books. So
Yeah.
that's what I've learned.
Yeah. And it really is true. Like we are independent creators. Our studios are a nice size. I know that, we make a decent living and stuff like that. But I don't have a budget for my productions. When I make stuff that's not a custom video, I just usually am working on trade content with other performers and stuff like that. I know that's how we put our movies out. That's how we distribute, make the movies to distribute through Trouble Films. Is mainly not a lot of capital to be hiring performers, paying them, and getting studios. The camera that I work with is a couple grand, whereas these studios are like multi-million dollar companies, some of them, and they have $20,000 cameras and a whole crew, and just all of this capital behind them. And so, it is sort of gate kept, especially around bodies, especially around the way people look. So, like if at some point in my life I decided to do a massive change and like cut my hair really short and sort of change the way I express my gender in a drastic way, there's a good chance that these mainstream companies might start shying away from hiring me as they have in the past. And just from like working with Courtney and watching how that watching those seeing those companies not hiring people like Courtney, and other performers like that, and just why why not, when we know, I mean, we have this data to see that really porn consumers like all kinds of different things. And from what I can tell, especially the consumers of like lesbian porn, the main thing they care about seeing are two people who genuinely want to be having sex with each other, and two people that it doesn't look like are faking and going through the motions and being gay for pay or whatever. And so I think it's really, at this point especially, it's almost just this willful block that they've decided, if you're going to work for these big companies, this is what it has to be. And that is another way that I think it is kind of, it sucks to be pushed, like not allowed into those spaces. But at the same time, I think that, in a lot of ways, Courtney, you especially, like, you were way ahead of the curve. You were making your own stuff a decade before anybody even was starting to think about making their own stuff. And that's speaking for myself as well, for sure too. And then so when the Pornhub thing did come along and studios weren't really hiring the way that they used to be, I was like, shit, I guess I got to get myself a camera and like try to get my shit together and figure this production thing out. But Courtney, you were already doing it for so long. And doing it as like, you made queer porn. Like, that's why I wanted to work with you. I wanted to get my foot into that side of things and not just be seen as, the girl that does all like the pretty, like, just, the girl porn, whatever. Like, I was like, no, but I'm queer. And like, I want that to be I want to be represented in that way, because that's more how I identify. So that's why I was so nervous the first time I met you, and that I just have always really looked up to you for taking the reins for yourself and being like, I'm gonna make this space. and you really have, and it's incredible. And the thing about Pornhub too is that you're so right. People are always like, how do I find the ethical porn? How do I find the real lesbian porn? No, nobody's making it. Nobody's making it. I hear that stuff and I'm just like, it's so frustrating because we are making it. We are so
I make it all the time. I need more eyeballs on it.
Yes.
I'm glad you said that because, yeah, people.
If you're only watching porn on Pornhub, if that is where you consume all of your porn, you are not, first of all, you're not really consuming it like super ethically. I mean, maybe a little bit more these days because there's not as much, the stolen stuff has sort of gone away. But the truth is that it's appealing to the most common denominator, which is usually the lowest common denominator. Like you're going to see all of that stuff, just those tropes. And like if it's a trans porn, oh my god, it's so shocking, there's a cock, what? Like that's the low quality stuff. So you really have to get away from those mainstream sources of porn and be looking for the stuff that you want to be seeing.
Definitely. It's almost like complaining that there's no good music, but then realizing that person is only listening to like the Spotify top 40.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, well,
Also,
where are you looking? Because I make fat lesbian porn like at least 3 times a month. Like I need people to buy it. Like, come on through.
Yes.
so it's out there,
It
but it can be
comes
really, really difficult to find. And that leads into a perfect question that was posed by one of our listeners in chat, which is they wanted to know how they can find these porn sites. They wanted some suggestions. So if you guys have a few that you can just kind of throw out here, they want to know where they can find some body positive porn sites.
What a
So now's
wonderful
your chance to
opportunity.
plug.
Troublefilms.com, Sinn dash. Okay.
So I run a network of websites. Trouble Films is my film production company and like web production umbrella. So if you go to troublefilms.com, you can see a lot of stuff there, kind of all categories mushed together, all of my projects mushed together. All of the collective directors are all mushed together in there. So you can also find Sinn Sage's entire filmmaking collection there as well. So Sinn's almost made like 15 or 20 films with us by now in the past 3 years. Like you can get a lot from the websites. And then my queer porn website is queerporn.tv. And that's a bunch of hardcore porn, over 200 videos. I have either filmed them or been in them or know the people who made them, every single video on that website. So if you want to know where exactly your porn is coming from, you can get it directly from Queer Porn TV. Also in 2002, I launched my first website, like indiepornrevolution.com is like,
Right.
it's 20 years old. It's called NoFo, but it's kind of hard to get to NoFo. But if you go to indiepornrevolution.com, that's another one of my porn sites. So those are 3 sites you can check out that I've created, because I think what's interesting about me, or like from what I hear from like Sinn and other people who know my work really closely, is I kind of invented content creating like 10 years before it happened. By making the realization that nobody was going to, make me a porn star, that the only person who was going to, help me succeed in this was going to be me and my community and like my cheerleaders and lovers and family. That's when I was just like, fine, I'll just start my own websites. I'll just start a whole network. Like, why not? If they can have a porn empire, why can't I?
Yep.
Like Sin said, you were definitely way ahead of the curve, and that's fantastic. I love hearing what
Um,
you've done.
Thank you. And like, there's a tons of really rad people like on OnlyFans and ManyVids and Pornhub. And if you type in, BBW porn star or fat plus size porn star in Pornhub, you might find out who some of the big players are. I definitely have some favorites if I can divulge.
Please.
I mean, they've been asking, so yeah, give them the answers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, I'm one of my favorites, so you can look up Courtney Trouble.
One of my
Particularly my scenes with Sinn are really awesome examples of like queer lesbian porn, if you want all the good stuff. I am obsessed with April Flores. She's my big sister and has been like a huge mentor to me in this industry, you know, just helping me navigate being a fat girl. She even has a book called Fat Girl.
yeah.
So she's probably like my icon when it comes to like BBW or fat or plus size. A few others would be Carla Lane and Marley Moore or Marley the Booty. And I feel like if you look up those three people, you're going to find a lot of porn. So I'll stop there and have
Awesome. Well,
fun.
okay, so thank you for providing that actually, because there is this misnomer that there's just not stuff out there, and people really do need to just kind of have an idea of where to look. But I wanted to go back on something that Courtney said earlier, and then Sin kind of built off of, and that was Courtney had mentioned that like you find these kinds of issues in media and movies, like everywhere, right? And then we were talking about just how hard it can be in general for people who have difficulty breaking into different things. So porn and, just regular everyday society, there's a lot of tie-ins, right? They influence each other. Porn influences society, society influences porn. There's body positivity movements in both places. There's also stigmas and issues in both places. So, Courtney, I wanted you to touch on it for a second. We've talked about some of the positives and negatives about body positivity and porn, but how does that translate for you to like the general public? Like what issues have you noticed and where are some of the overlaps?
That's such a good question. I feel like I've had a few really good opportunities, this being one of them, to talk about fat sex and body positivity and sexuality. And I definitely think one of the biggest things that comes up is just how to build confidence. And so, what I like to tell people, you know, is to try to just get used to your body, you know, try to just get accustomed to it. One of the best ways that I had for that was to actually take pictures of myself. So it's kind of funny how the act of making porn helped me naturalize and normalize my fat body, and helped me come to a place where I was feeling extremely body positive. And then I also realized that the more I exposed myself to other fat people in the media, be it, you know, April Flores in her films, or someone like Lizzo, or someone like Beth Ditto, who are two musicians and actresses that I really admire for being fat in public.
Yeah.
You know, like people talk a lot about like, oh, you've got a lot of confidence, like, oh, you're a big, beautiful woman. And I'm like, so I also want to say, like, there are no exceptions. All bodies are beautiful. Fat, thin, middle, no body, green body, blue body, you're a smurf, great. Your body is beautiful. Like, that's not the conversation. The conversation is how do you get to a place where you're feeling positive enough about your body to take some of the risks
Mm.
that maybe you've been wanting to take? Take a boudoir photo, go on a first date, you know, like sign up
Yes.
for Tinder. I think those things are so crucial, like for most of, from all of us, you know, finding that confidence to like ask for something that we want.
Yes.
And I do feel like self-esteem is the first thing that people try to steal from us, especially women, especially young girls. They're constantly
Absolutely.
trying to take away our power to be confident, which leads to success. And
Yeah.
so that's the biggest fight, you know, and it is about it's about mainstream society, you know. And I think Lizzo is one of the most powerful examples of that. I feel like she's very vocal about fat phobia in celebrity life. And like, yeah, I mean, it's a whole different world now too than it was like 3 or 4 years ago. Like
Gosh.
even just Rihanna getting pregnant like changed the world. Like
Yeah.
Rihanna gaining 20 pounds changed the world because some people were having a conversation about in between bodies and how
Ooh.
like skinny people can be fat and fat people can be skinny. And like there's all this stuff going on. And it really is just about building confidence.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. In between bodies and
Oh,
all of that stuff. And I want to say
Mhm.
too, I think a common misconception is kind of that working in porn or sex work, being a stripper, is really, really competitive, and that putting your body out there, for the world to consume, can will make you feel worse about it. And I guess I can only speak for myself, but obviously, like, we're always going to encounter a hater from time to time. They're going to find like the one little thing about our bodies that we might be insecure with, or all the little things that we might be a little insecure with, and then they're going to jump on that and use it as a weapon against us. And so that happens from time to time to every single one of us, for sure. But my experience has been that rather than feeling this sense of competition, rather than feeling this idea that, oh, like, my thigh goes out here in this area, or there's cottage cheese here on that area, or like nitpicking my body in that way, if I had this little voice inside of me that does that, I get on the internet and my fans are like, "Oh, I love that little thing right there on your thigh or whatever. Like, it's so sexy." And I'm like, "What?" This is me in the past. But over the years, it was more just like this concept that there's no perfection does not exist. It's so in the eye of the beholder. And so,
Right.
if I'm being my own worst critic, well, then it's almost like the universe sends me I'm sure we love that here. This this little someone will pop up and be like, "Oh, that one thing that I just happen to be feeling insecure about today." Someone will come up and be like, "God, I love that one thing about your body," and without me even saying anything about it. So I feel almost the opposite, that it's like that being in this industry has made me feel more confident, about my body, because it's made it easier for me to just be like, oh, that one person who said that shitty thing, like, that's just one person, they can fuck off. Like, all these people over here like this about me.
Mhm.
And in that way, it's really made me like a much more confident person in general, like, not just about my body, but just about like my being and stuff. Like, I do feel super empowered in a lot of different ways. So yeah, people might be surprised to hear that about porn stars. um